Hey, welcome to the Open House Show. It's me, Jesse Meadow, and we've got a good show for you today. We won't waste any time. We've got JP Burlington, Director of Admissions at Trinity-Pawling School up in New York. We're going to be talking about all boys schools, the boarding experience in general, some of the advantages and disadvantages, and then how we overcome those obstacles as well. So without further ado, let me bring them on. Hey.
How are you?
Gentlemen, doing well. JP, welcome. Chris, as always, welcome. Excellent. How's everything? I heard you're getting some snow, you were telling me earlier.
Yeah, we haven't had, it's probably been about 3 or 4 weeks since our last snowfall, but it sounds like we've got some weather coming in this week. So
yeah, that's one issue we definitely don't have to worry about in Florida. So Godspeed up there.
Yeah. If you put a golf club in my hand, and I'd be happy to switch with you for a little short weekend or something like that.
You're more than welcome to come on down. So, but, we'll get right started with the show. JP, there may be some people in the audience that aren't so familiar with you. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey in admissions and your kind of history and how you ended up at Trinity-Pawling School?
Sure. Thanks again for having me. It's a pleasure to be on with you all, especially after watching some of my colleagues who I know be on the open house. So it's a pleasure to be here. So admissions for me, it actually goes back all the way to my time at Trinity-Pawling as a tour guide, a member of the Key Club, and walking families around campus and being a huge part of the admissions life here at Trinity-Pawling as a student. And then I went on to Wheaton College up in Massachusetts and continued that passion for talking to families in the admissions process. And by my senior year, I was actually a senior intern. And I was sometimes I can't believe that this happened, but an 18-year-old student was interviewing college-bound kids. Excuse me, I was 22 at that time. I don't even remember. But just
you were young. You were young.
I was young. I was something. But interviewing, students to come to college, and the passion for admissions, the passion for schools, really started then. And so Trinity-Pawling was just an obvious next step. And even though I had different chapters since college, Trinity-Pawling was always one of them. And so in 2015, I ended up back here at Trinity-Pawling and became the director of admission. And after being at Westover School, an all-girls school in Connecticut, and Brooks School, co-ed school up in Massachusetts, all fantastic schools, but just different experiences. And so admissions, marketing, communications, being a part of a school has always been something that I've been proud to be a part of, especially in the boarding school world.
Yeah, it's always good to get, the alumni feel to things and, having them come back and if, a lot of the things, that Chris and I are passionate about were instilled in us in our times, as boarding students. I guess part of the topic today was, the boarding experience and what that means to you and how that can kind of shape and mold where you end up going in your future, just like anything else at that age, I guess. But, specifically with Trinity-Pawling, what are some things that draw, families or perhaps yourself, might be the same thing, to your school?
Yeah, I think the number one aspect to me of a boarding school environment is the community. And as you guys know, the fact that the two of you were there together and you're still together, kudos to that relationship. But
a lot of compromise.
Sure. But fostering those relationships is the biggest aspect of any boarding school. And for me to be back at Trinity-Pawling, with any boarding school, you have those long tenured faculty, and I'm lucky enough to be working with them. My second set of parents, who were my dorm parents 2 out of my 4 years, are still here, still burning the midnight oil in athletics. In one of them is our librarian. So that those relationships, that community aspect, I think is vital to any organization, especially a boarding school. And I go back to, the all boys part of something we'll talk about later, but the all boys brotherhood, fostering those relationships is an incredible aspect of this. And we actually, they put on a virtual candlelight service, which is our one of the biggest traditions we have at Trinity-Pawling, and alumni from all time talk about our candlelight service. And unfortunately, of course, we were virtual for that. And we have a fantastic videographer on campus who put that together with a student. And one of the parts of it was interviewing some of the students, and they just talked about what that tradition means to them. And the number one thing came back to community and relationships. And I think that's for the boys that are, 15, 16, 17 to realize that and understand that already is remarkable.
Yeah. I mean, that's obviously the huge draw. I kid you not. I had, maybe a month ago, come across some tapes from a VHSC, like the little mini tapes that you'd have like in the thing. And I guess I might've been in 9th grade, Chris. That would have put you in like 11th grade, maybe.
Don't tell people. They're going to want to see this. Yeah. I don't know if I want people to see this.
I'm watching this tape of us going around campus, acting like, kids, and in the dorm, and going room to room and remembering people and seeing people I haven't thought of in years. And I got to, it is a culture. When you talk about that community, it really was a culture in the dorms and with other boarding students and your routines of the day and going through those experiences together. It's just a different kind of bond that you kind of get. And
yeah, it was like this out of body experience when I was watching it, because you're almost like pulled back to like how that was and how it felt. And it's definitely, when we were talking earlier, JP, about the brotherhood and how that is, and kind of how you become really close with this group of guys. It's definitely 100% how my experience was.
Right. And I think that goes back to, every boarding school person, man, woman, boy, girl, always has that story and always has that experience. And I think what makes it, different at a single gender school is those relationships are just a bit deeper. And, that experience with your roommate, you're not, to be totally honest, you're not competing for time with the boyfriend or the girlfriend. It's you and your roommate and you and your boys, or even more so you and the faculty kids. The faculty brats that we lovingly call them. They're running around campus and they're your, little brothers and sisters from, another family. And the opportunity to have that in an all boys environment gives you something, I think, a little bit more special than I have to say, than in a co-ed environment, because you're just not competing for time with other people. You've got your boys. And whether it's you're playing, Madden or NHL, or you're outside playing, disc golf, the time is with your boys, which is special.
Well, it's also too, more than time just being all boys, like, adding that competitive nature that we naturally have.
Sure.
All of those random emotions that come through. I like this girl, but she likes my friend, or whatever complication that occurs sometimes as an adolescent, normal things. Right. Those kind of things aren't even brought to the table anymore. Like that stuff's not a question. So, it even formulates, even more of a bond, because you don't have those negative or competitive issues that you might have in a co-ed environment, right. Depending on the relationship with what you have there. But, that is interesting, the difference between, being an all boys boarding school and what that experience, must be like. And as kind of a segue, maybe you could explain to us, the 5 elements,
Sure.
We spoke about before of what makes that and kind of how that builds that experience for them.
Absolutely. And I want to make sure that I'm giving credit to where credit's due. These 5 elements, come from the International Boys School Coalition. So
Awesome.
it's something that boys schools all across the world and boys in general benefit from this type of education. And I wanted to quote one thing from their website, and it says, "Schools for boys focus with intention on learning that addresses not only how to excel in academics, but also how to grow into a young man of integrity and empathy." And I think that, to me, sums up very much what we do here. And I think what all boys schools do, as I said, all over the world. But, these 5 elements, understanding and celebrating young men.
Mm-hmm.
We're all so different, especially boys, especially high school boys. We're complex. And anybody who ends up listening to this who has a high school boy or has a middle school boy, just beware. We're all complex, and we all need, different ways of teaching and different ways of growing. I think big part for Trinity-Pawling is building character-driven young men. Mm-hmm. What more time now in this world that we live in that we need integrity, empathy, character. And that's something that we talk about on a daily basis when we have our meetings in the chapel and we have our chapel talks. If not all, at least 80 to 90% talk about some type of character-driven element. And I think that's, something that we all need right now. Mm-hmm. We all know that boys learn differently. And that not only starts in the elementary and middle school years, but our strengths, boys' strengths are different than girls' strengths. We all know that girls mature faster than we do. And to be in a classroom where you can be yourself or be in the dining hall, and I'm not talking about being sophomoric or just, being that, but to be able to be who you are and not worry about what a very mature young lady is thinking across the hall or across the table. So I think boys, and this has been done scientifically with experiment. It's known that we all just learn differently, and we are able to, in an all boys classroom, really drive home how they learn and how they learn best. Each faculty member knows how to engage the student, knows how to look at a Trinity-Pawling, look at JP Burlington and know my strengths, know my weaknesses, and be able to tap into those and help me in different ways. Whether they're crafting a curriculum that works best, or just changing up the classroom environment. All of our classes, maybe not in COVID times, but our classrooms are set up in a collaborative environment. Mm-hmm. We're not quite like Harkness. We're not a Harkness method school, but we are a collaborative learning environment. So the classes, they're not set up in the old school, how we learned in rows. They're set up so that we can talk to one another. We can collaborate with one another and think critically in different ways. And I think that's so important. I'm going to come back to that one in a second, but the last one is we already talked about the lifelong friendships, the brotherhood. And not to say that, the two of you have it. You formed that relationship in your school. And I know my friends who went to co-ed schools have those relationships. But I have to go back to, I just think whether it's on the playing fields or on stage or wherever you are, there's just something deeper in those relationships. And I think, Jesse, it goes back to what you said, competition for time. Mm-hmm. It's that, and also the competitive nature that we have. Those battles in the dorm room with Madden or whatever, that creates something, that creates a dynamic that I just don't know that you have in other environments. And I think going back to an advantage, and this might, I don't mean to segue to kind of the next topic, but how boys learn best is attributed to our experiential learning and our project-based learning. And I think that's something that we really concentrate on a lot.
No, and that's key. I mean, in general, you find that, huge draws to independent schools or private schools is obviously the individual attention that's lost at a public school just because of the nature.
Right.
Now you throw in the aspect of we're able to get through to the student on a level that is single gender specifically for them, and not have to, come back with more of a vague introduction or method because we're having to reach both sides here. Now you have even more of an individualized approach, and I agree. I mean, there were many situations. I mean, Chris can attest to this, but back when we started going to school there, it was a very different school than it is today as far as population is concerned. It wasn't an all boys school, but it was definitely a lot more males than females, especially when you consider the boarding population. I mean, it was night and day, the difference in numbers. And those kind of things get instilled in you, through your dorm parents. I can imagine the conversations that I had with my dorm parents being the all boys dorm parent. Now expand that out to every single faculty and staff member on campus, because that's what they're dealing with. And, my experience would have been totally different in that regard. And furthermore, how timely is it to have that kind of character building and nurturing at a time like this where the next generation of members of society need to know these things. And it's really going to put them behind as far as advancement in whatever they do if they don't have these kind of traits instilled in them from a young age. So it's nice. It's timely.
Yeah. And I think, I go back to the story that we talk about a lot. And, for all boarding schools, we have Parents Weekend, and Parents Weekend is always 5 or 6 weeks into the school year. And I think where that parent story that always comes up is just the transformation that they see in their son after a 5 or 6 week period. And sometimes it's even more so. Yes, they see it in their 9th grade son, because it's just a totally, they haven't seen their son in 6 weeks. Yeah. And it's totally different. I mean, they probably have facial hair at that point, whatever the case may be. But it's the junior parents.
They know how to do laundry now.
Well, no, I'm giving a shout out to E&R Laundry Service. It's the greatest thing that ever was created. So can you imagine 300 boys trying to do laundry in their dorm room? It would be flooded every day.
I can't imagine walking into the laundry room.
Kids got a maid today, man. They just have a service for it.
Yeah, so we got rid of those a long time ago. It costs more to fix than it did to teach. But it's the juniors that come who are repeat juniors at Trinity-Pawling, and they've spent 3 years at a public school, and the parents see them after 6 weeks in this environment, and to a parent, it's, oh my gosh, I wish we had found you 3 years earlier. Because they see the transformation, whether it's academic, could be athletic, but I think it's more internal, and it goes to the character aspect. It goes to just the change in behavior. And I don't want to talk about, oh, well, they now know how to open a door for someone, or there's just a different, because we are with them on a daily basis, and because we're teaching them in the classroom, in the dining hall, in the chapel, on the athletic field, and in the dormitories, you can't take that. There's nothing that can say how important that time is. And there's a vivid change in them over a short amount of time.
Yeah, that's key when you have that kind of influence and time with them. That is a natural thing that will happen.
Right.
And lucky for them, they're able to have that kind of time put into them by I'm sure a plethora of individuals that all have their best interest in mind.
Yeah.
And kind of going along with that, I know that we spoke a little bit about some programs and things that you guys offer to kind of support exactly what we've been talking about as far as the elements and the benefits and things like that. So maybe you can enlighten us on some of those programs and how that, benefits at least the students there, but I imagine anywhere that they were kind of implemented.
Sure. Yeah, I think the biggest program that I think sort of epitomizes what we do is it's called our Practicum for Civic Leadership. And it's a big umbrella of a program that benefits all of our grades from 7th grade. We have a 7th and 8th grade, lower school, middle school, and everybody's participating in these projects. And that's what they are. They are a project-based approach. And so we're actually in it. We're in the heart of it right now in December. And it just so happened that we were able to change up what we're doing. We are, as many schools, we sent everybody home right before Thanksgiving. And what we chose to do for the month of December, instead of having remote classes, we decided to do our Practicum for Civic Leadership. And we've just changed we're calling it the winter session because of just the timing of it all. And so the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th graders are all doing some type of project that the faculty created. And it is 2 faculty members from different disciplines, maybe even an admissions officer who wants to kind of get back into the quote unquote classroom. Mm-hmm. And they come up with a project that might be, one group is building owl boxes. And so, it's not just, it's an opportunity for the boys to, again, be creative, using their hands. Mm-hmm. What boy doesn't like have a hammer and nail and a saw, and things like that. So we have boys all over the country right now, in the final stages of building owl boxes. Another program was called Moneyball. And for those of you Major League Baseball fans, or maybe even what's the guy's name?
I saw the movie.
Nice job. Wow, that was quick, Jesse.
Been a fan for a long time. Me and Brad.
The camera doesn't pan all the way over. There's actually a poster of Brad in his room.
That's great. So we all know the movie Moneyball. Story of the Oakland Athletics and how they were. And their general manager and the analytics. And so we have boys right now kind of doing a Moneyball in maybe in their passion of hockey or lacrosse. And so the 2 teachers in that is an English teacher and a hockey coach. And then Coach Doyle is a baseball coach. And he's also a teacher in the classroom. And so they're coming together to weave in this Moneyball experience. So we have kids who are doing hands-on learning. We also have kids who are diving into some of their passions, maybe in the athletic world or the art world. We have another program doing another project in theater. So every kid is able to dive into a passion of theirs, or maybe find something that they didn't realize was in them. So my advisee actually decided to do a project that's more about it's on a 1950s radio show. And so he's doing some acting right now. And the theater director has already said to me and to him, when we get back to normal, you need to get on stage because you have that aspect. Mm-hmm. There's something in you that could make you a wonderful actor. And so that's something that I guarantee you 3 months ago, he would never thought would be told of him. That he could be on stage and be an actor. The other prong to this is our global collaborative challenge. And that's where our junior class is doing a collaborative project rather than an individual. And so they're given, just as it says, a global challenge. And that could be the Pacific Ocean garbage patch. It could be the Electoral College. It's just so timely, right? The New York Times just talked about, is the Electoral College going to exist? Mm-hmm. And is it good for the country? Another one is about the Supreme Court. So these boys, these young men are diving into these global issues. And similar to maybe an argument or I'm trying to think of the word.
Like a debate or something.
Thank you. A debate. They have to pick a side. And the 5 of them that are grouped up into a team pick that side and argue it for 12 minutes. And with a panel, so they have a presentation that they have to do. Each boy has to talk for 2 minutes and defend their response. And what's amazing about it is the opportunity for them to work as a team. And these group of 5 and 6, what's interesting is that it's randomly chosen. So it's not your roommate. It's not your co-captain of the soccer team, guy that you spend all this time with. It's random. And so it's also, going into that opportunity
outside of their comfort zone.
Yes, exactly. So again, my advisee, he's doing it right now. Public speaking, not his forte. He is as bright as you can be, but working in a team environment, public speaking, those are some weaknesses, to be honest, that he is going to be challenged with. And for them to be able to do this and to know this topic, what's great is some of these kids who've done this have gone into their admissions interview for college. And, someone always asks, so what's a topic that you feel strongly about? And these kids can just rattle off 12 minutes of that conversation about the Supreme Court, the Electoral College. A couple of years ago, it was about the Olympics. And should it just keep going in this awful way that we do the Olympics, where Brazil and Rio is basically bankrupt because of having to host the Olympics. And so they actually chose that it should just be 4 places, so 2 summer and 2 winter, places that have already have the infrastructure. So it's just been really interesting to see the growth of this endeavor for us. It's 5 years old, 6 years old, and every year it's gotten better. And there's been a different iteration, and now it's in this winter session, and we're excited because moving forward into 2021, so December of 2021, the boys will be on campus, knock on wood, and everything will be back to normal, and they're going to be able to do this 2.5-week session right here on campus. But what's different about it is that maybe they do an internship. The seniors maybe stay home. I'm just shooting out, ideas, and the headmaster might get me for this, but maybe somebody from California goes home for Thanksgiving and finds an internship in a company that he's got passions for. And for 2.5 weeks, he's going to that office on a daily basis, and a better experience than maybe just sitting in a classroom, but being out there in the workforce, doing an internship, and finding out if that truly is his passion. Yeah. We always talk about at Trinity-Pawling about gifts and talents that were given to them. Well, this is an opportunity for them to find out if that's really what they want to do with their life, knowing that they have plenty of time to figure that all out. But or we study something like the Vietnam War, and we do a road trip down to Washington, D.C. Trinity-Pawling is located 60 miles north of New York City. So we're in a great opportunity where you can get on the train, you can get on a bus, and go see hundreds of different educational opportunities for the boys. So this winter session is really going to change the way we do things. We're enhancing the educational opportunities for the boys, and it's an opportunity that our head of school has talked about this pandemic as a crisis, of course, but he always talks about with crisis comes opportunity.
Absolutely.
And this is one of those opportunities that we've taken advantage of. And this winter session is really going to change the outlook for a lot of our boys.
Yeah, I think, with, expanding that scope a little bit, the way that you built a structure and a program to benefit them, a lot of other schools, most schools have some sort of, affinity groups or clubs or things like that. And to build a structure like what you're talking about, maybe even over one of the breaks, where they do something related to that perspective. and they challenge themselves as a group, a cohort unit, get out of their comfort zones, learn some different things. I could imagine talking about, the Vietnam War from different, affinity groups, or a Supreme Court ruling from different perspectives, and how that would all kind of come together. I mean, that would be a great opportunity for some other schools to kind of follow suit, but, just with a smaller group, maybe not so much with the all boys intention,
Right.
or maybe so.
Yeah. And I've been, at schools that have similar type programs. But it's different when you can, do it with an all boys perspective.
Yeah.
One of the global collaborative challenges that they did a couple of years ago was the Me Too movement. And it was a wake up call for these 5 or 6 boys, because their panel happened to be a group of female faculty. And if you can imagine, a bunch of juniors in high school thinking that they know what the Me Too movement was really about. Oh my word. It was a wake up call like none other. And they would not have gotten that experience if they had done that with 3 or 4 girls in their cohort. These 6 guys learned a lot in a short amount of time about this topic. And, I think not all of them are that, dynamic, and, but, it's pretty amazing what the boys come out of it. It's truly remarkable to see it.
Yeah. And so I know what, is probably on everyone's mind right now is kind of, we've talked about this before, is the challenges that are presented to someone like yourself, taking the enrollment funnel, and now you're taking out half the population.
Yeah. And
it is all boys. And obviously you trying to communicate with these families, the benefits, the advantages. And so, if you could just pull back the curtain a little bit, JP, and kind of give us some of the advantages that you see going into those conversations. And then also, obviously, some of the inherent challenges that it presents itself when you're competing with co-ed schools, especially when it's some of your, unique programs or programs you're proud of, like athletics or whatnot. And so, just take the curtain back for us, JP.
Yeah. Well, I think that, we've talked a lot about the advantages, and we talk about these advantages every chance we have with boys that we're touring around. And, that opportunity for an educational experience like you've never experienced before. I mean, 99% of these kids are not coming from all boys schools, right? They're all coming from co-ed environments. And it is our job in the admissions world of all boys schools to sell. Let's just be honest. Admissions is a sales job. And you're selling the advantages of this experience. And it's that individualized attention. It's the opportunity to learn and grow in a very unique environment, knowing that that's not the environment that the world lives in. But for 4 years, for 3 years, for 2 years, this is an environment where you're going to be stretched in different ways. And I think the benefits, far outweigh. And I was actually thinking about this question this morning, as we all do, getting ready for work. But it's a short chapter in your life that you could take this time and really look inside yourself and see what I could become. Because again, there's no that, and again, when anybody talks about all boys, they don't start talking about those 5 things that we talked about. They talk about the distraction of having girls in the classroom. I mean, that's what everybody thinks. Oh, well, that's the main reason. You're too distracted in the classroom in your public high school, and you need to get away from that. Of course, that's a big part of it. And that part of it allows you to learn differently. That part of it allows you to be who you are, and not what Jennifer or Julie or whomever across the chair from you thinks. So I think those advantages are very stark and are right there. The challenge is, Chris, I mean, you said it, we're looking for half the population, and you're talking about admissions and enrollment, and you already take out half the population, you're starting from a very different position.
You're already starting at like 1 or 2% of the families to begin with.
Absolutely. And let's also be honest that boarding school is not cheap.
No.
So even though all of our schools have wonderful financial aid, and we give out an incredible amount of financial aid awards, that 1% that everybody talks about, they help continue the revenue that comes in from those families are just so important. And so you're now talking about 50% of the 1%, which you just said, that's our biggest challenge. And the other aspect of that I talk about all the time is, of that half the population, how many of those do you think actually wants to go to an all boys school? Right now, this is where we dive in and say, we go back to the advantages. That's the quick flip of the switch that says, yes, you do not have your girlfriend next to you all the time. But what are there are so many more advantages to what this opportunity is going to afford you. And Chris, you mentioned athletics. That's obviously something where we can dive into really easily, because a lot of the students that come to a place like Trinity-Pawling have athletic aspirations in their minds, right? So I want to go play Division I, X, Y, or Z, or I just want to play in college at a great Division III school. Well, again, the athletics at an all boys school, especially Trinity-Pawling in the Founders League, you're going to get some of the best competition that you can have in New England. And so that is a huge attraction to a lot of the boys that are looking at a place like Trinity-Pawling. But I go back to, because again, as a colleague of mine in the admissions office, he's our hockey coach. He also talks about that's 1% of the population that's going to go on to play Division I athletics.
Right.
So, I mean, just in the last 30 seconds, we're depleting the percentage incredibly.
Yeah, I think Jesse was a starting point guard on basketball in high school, but he didn't go to college. I'm just putting that out there.
Exactly.
Maybe I could have. I chose not to.
Yeah, right. The dream was crushed. Well, and that was me. I mean, I was basketball was a huge part of my life. You can't tell in this wonderful podcast that I'm 5'6" and can't jump. So I gave up the basketball dream, but I knew that in my own mind that was not going to be there for me anymore. So I then used the benefits of this experience. I had a lot of other interests. I got on stage. I happened to be a good singer, so I was able to utilize that as well. Trinity-Pawling has got an incredible program for kids who learn differently. I was one of those kids who needed extra support in different ways. Right. And that's why I ended up here.
So JP,
go ahead, Chris.
Let me ask you this. We've touched on this with other folks that oversee, boarding programs. But I want to ask you this and get your take as well. Someone that's been, lived it as a student, now obviously on the other side of it. As you deal with families that are not legacy families, meaning they have not come from this environment, how do you articulate what you just articulated the last 2 minutes, that culture, that beyond the books and academics, how do you communicate that in an effective way?
Well, I mean, that is, again, another challenge is when you're on the phone with a family or you're walking around with a family and they say, we're not a boarding school family. We didn't know this existed. We're from the Midwest, or where they didn't know these were the schools that were out here. So I'm lucky enough, being an alum at Trinity-Pawling, I just dive into my experience. And again, not everybody has that opportunity, but you do see why in the admissions world, a lot of alums are hired at their schools. I mean, it's a no-brainer, right? Mm-hmm. You want that love and passion for your school in the admissions office. And you want that in your classrooms as well. So I just go back to when I'm walking around, I go back to my experience and the opportunities that the Trinity-Pawling gave me. And when I'm able to speak passionately about that, it changes the mindset of families. And I even think the folks that we work with, who are educational consultants, who are middle school placement people, that's the type of conversation that they have to have, even with a New York City independent school family who never thought their son or daughter would go to boarding school. We have to talk about those distinct advantages that you're not going to find at home. And for me, going back to your question, Chris, it's being able to speak, talk the talk. And I think the families that I walk around or that I talk with in my office, they see, the light shine, right? My eyes start sprinkling with joy about this environment.
Yeah, no one's going to be more authentic about what their child's walking in because you've really walked in their shoes.
Absolutely. And for me, when I worked at the other schools, I then had to channel an experience I had with a family.
Right.
Because that experience is what the prospective family, they want to hear that, knowing that I didn't go there, but the experiences I had in the dorms as a dorm parent. That's the type of experience they want to hear. And so I just always go back to the passion that I have for a school, especially Trinity-Pawling. That's what makes the challenges able to be overcome, because we can talk. And I have another colleague in my office that is an alum. And I have another colleague who is a past parent of 2 boys. That's not, that's on purpose. That's just, that's strategic. Right. And so those are how we overcome those challenges is that in a nutshell. But also I think another question I think we talk about is how we overcome the obstacles is we utilize our parents in the admissions process. They are our admissions ambassadors. And especially when they can't come to campus and talk with our families, they're on the phone with these prospective families talking about their experience. So we have admissions ambassadors and then our special interest faculty. And that's the art teachers, the music teachers, the theater director, the coaches. They are a part of the admissions process.
Right.
And, any school that doesn't utilize the people that are in the trenches on a daily basis, they're making a big mistake. Our teachers are the best salespeople that we have because they are living it. I sit in this office and I hear stories, and I have my stories, but they're living the day to day. They see the life-altering moment that occurs in the classroom or on the athletic field, and especially in the dormitory. And I think it's very unique.
So JP, let me ask you this too. I think we all agree, like when you first, onboard a family and they come onto campus for the first time as a student, that first 4-6 weeks is crucial, right? And so what are some steps, obviously you've got an additional layer because now you're going in, a lot of these students are probably coming from co-gender situations. Now you've got this additional layer of being away from home, etc. What are some of the things that you try to do to ward off that homesickness that creeps into every boarding student that first 4 to 6 weeks?
Yeah, it's amazing because even I came from a junior boarding school before Trinity-Pawling, and I was even homesick at Trinity-Pawling, even though I had 4 years of all boys boarding. I lived it. I mean, that's why I kept going. Yes, folks, I did this for 8 years, all boys, and I'm okay. But it's the immediate, in the dormitories, you have that junior or senior proctor who is a big brother immediately. And we have a big brother process as well, like a buddy system. Right. So immediately when you get on campus, you have someone to talk to. And I would say this, that we do not frown upon being homesick. I mean, that's part of the process. And we know that they're going to miss their parents, and for sure the parents are going to miss their child. I would say it's a different world now than when the three of us went to boarding school. And I think I told you this on our call last week, a payphone phone call every Saturday night to my parents. That was our communication. Yeah. So I'm not saying that now in 2020 with cell phones and FaceTime and Skyping and Zooming, that there isn't that homesickness, but there is an opportunity, and maybe too much of an opportunity, let's be honest, that the kids are communicating with their parents all the time. And I would say this is not part of the open house show, but that's a challenge for boarding schools. It could be it could be another show in itself, but that's a challenge for boarding schools now when I don't know that boys, girls, they don't utilize their faculty as much as they did back in the 90s because of the device. And so, we that orientation, the first couple of weeks is it's a slow process, and we try to engage everybody as best we can.
Yeah, I think it's important too, which is a unique, I guess, method of today. But I remember, dealing with the orientations, you're really, especially the international families that come and drop their students off, their children off. Like you almost have to, engage them in a manner that makes them okay with leaving as well. Yes. A lot of people, we always focus on the kids, but the parents sometimes have a very difficult time, letting the students, and like you said, they're on their phones, they're on their FaceTimes, they're staying involved and only obviously getting one perspective of, a new student that's trying to figure this all out and go straight into panic mode. So, there's also a lot of -- with the parents, these days, especially with that communication ability.
Yeah. And one of the things that we do, and any school should do this, and I'm sure they do, but we do a 2 or 3 international student orientation, and the parents are invited. So they stay in a hotel close by for 2 or 3 days. They're on campus, and they're experiencing, we have dinners, we have lunches, and it's a big part of the process, just exactly for what you said. They're traveling 3,000 miles. They're dropping their kid off and potentially in a place that they have actually never visited before. Mm-hmm. A lot of these families don't come to school during the admissions process, especially now in this. So this coming September is going to be the most crucial opening of schools that we've ever had, because the highest percentage of kids will have not been on this campus yet. And our summers are probably going to be very different because a lot of families are going to want to come and see the school for the first time. So if you can imagine this, we're gonna have to, sell a family on a place potentially that they've never seen in person, and let's add that to the list of challenges.
Man, yeah, there's definitely.
Do you guys have a mouse? Is it?
I don't know. I think so. Running around the screen somewhere. I'm not sure. But in any event, I guess the mouse is a smooth transition to, our last piece. Sure. I'm talking about the area. I know we've talked about some challenges and such, but what are you seeing in your area as far as enrollment? We talked a little bit about how California is kind of doing things and Florida is kind of the Wild West. What's it like where you guys, how are you seeing enrollment? And then, as a follow-up, where do you see the biggest opportunity enrollment this year?
Right. So I think, the tri-state area, we are, as I said, we're 60 miles from New York City. When I grew up, I was an hour and 40 minutes growing up in New Jersey from Trinity-Pawling, and we're 3 miles from the Connecticut border. So we're right in the midst of the boarding school world. And, all the schools that we compete against athletically, we compete against in the admissions process. And I've heard mixed things from a lot of schools. I've heard that, some of the junior boarding schools this summer had such a huge influx of families who needed to get out of the city. And, a lot of they were seeing the writing on the wall that, the New York City schools might be remote or at a hybrid. And so a lot of families were moving up to the countryside to go to school. And, we're even seeing that now with families who are looking to make a change for January. And so any schools out there that do have beds for families are going to see an influx right now. I mean, we have families visiting campus who are looking because they can't do the remote anymore. And now that things have gotten worse before they've gotten better, more and more schools are going away from. I just heard from a New York City school that they did a hybrid 2 days in, 3 days out, or the reverse, and now they're all home. So it's an opportunity. Again, with crisis comes opportunity for us. And but we saw a lot of our schools saw this admissions process was a little slower than normal because families couldn't visit in September, October, and November. It almost made them go slower into the application process. So we didn't see as many inquiries early on. We definitely didn't see the application process start up. Now, I think people are realizing, oh my God, we've got a month until the application deadline. So, we saw have seen an influx in the applications come in. And as I said, we're seeing a lot more. We are still doing in-person visits, obviously with all the protocols in place.
Right.
And so we're doing that basically until the boys come back to campus. We did not have visits when the boys were on campus, or we did have a couple, but they were at specific times. So we're utilizing the time now when the boys are not here to get people on campus. Perfect.
That's good. Yeah, and I agree. I think that some of the biggest opportunity is also the biggest handicap at the moment. But
right.
Retention, obviously, with some of those people that got those boosts and what is coming your way, keeping them. But again, I always go back to the value that you're able to get, especially when you talk about a unique program like All Boys or something like that. That's a value you're not going to be able to find in many other places. And not that it's an easy sell, but it is something that differentiates yourself from others. And hopefully keep those families with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think going to that retention piece, I think a lot of schools who do this right, who do the COVID piece right and keep their campuses safe and their protocols in place, I think they will have the best retention moving into September. And schools that struggled with it, I think as we all know, families have a choice. They can choose to be here. They can choose to be somewhere else. It'll be very interesting to see coming this September, this summer and this September, what happens. And I'm just happy to say that we did it right this fall. Moving forward, I think we've got a good plan in place for 2021.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for the time. We've covered a lot of topics. I think you're on the right track, and I've definitely been enlightened on a lot of the challenges that you face, and others that have those single-sex admissions processes. And I think some of the advantages that we talked about really strike to the core of what you guys do over there. And we really appreciate you coming on and taking the time on a busy Monday, I'm sure. So thank you so much, Chris. Thank you as well. Hope you all enjoyed the show.
Thank you, JP, and happy holidays, man, as well. And we appreciate your time.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Jesse, Chris. Thanks so much. Thanks for having me on Open House. It's been fun.
Awesome. See ya. Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.